I thought our last family cruise through the Caribbean would be the crowning glory of our golden wedding anniversary, a testament to 50 years of unwavering love and a lifetime of shared dreams. Arthur, my beloved Arthur, still held my hand with the same gentle strength as he had on our wedding day, though time had etched a few more lines around his kind eyes. We were on the promenade deck, the warm ocean breeze ruffling my silver hair, the endless sapphire expanse of the sea stretching out before us, promising nothing but tranquility. But that tranquility was a mirage. It was nothing but a cruel, shimmering lie. Because just 3 days ago, my own son, Marcus, the boy we had nurtured and loved, the very flesh and blood of our union, pushed us overboard. He pushed us into that beautiful, deceiving sea, his face a mask of cold, calculated intent, to silence us forever. As the icy water swallowed us whole, and the last vestige of his false smile vanished above the darkening waves, Arthur, clinging to a broken piece of deck railing, whispered with his last breath, "Evie, don't move. Play dead. Or he'll finish what he started." And that's when I knew. This wasn't just an attempt on our lives, it was the chilling, terrifying end of a 40-year lie that was moments from being exposed. It was the beginning of our desperate fight for survival against our own child. Our life before this monstrous revelation had been, to all appearances, idyllic. Our little suburban home in Willow Creek was a haven, filled with the scent of my freshly baked apple pies and the gentle hum of Arthur's workshop. He, a retired financial consultant, meticulously managed our modest savings, while I, Evelyn Evie Whitman, cherished my years as an elementary school teacher. We had built a world centered around simple joys, Sunday picnics, evening strolls, and the quiet pride we felt for our only son, Marcus. Marcus. Even now, his name tastes like ash in my mouth. He was always special, our bright, ambitious boy. From his early days, he showed a keen intellect, a drive that we, perhaps naively, mistook for admirable ambition. We cheered him on when he started his own business, a seemingly prosperous import-export company, and beamed with pride when he married Catherine, a stunning woman with an elegant demeanor and a sharp wit. They had given us 2 wonderful grandchildren, and our family, as I saw it, was complete, a picture of American success and happiness. This cruise, the Golden Odyssey through the sun-drenched Caribbean, was Marcus and Catherine's extravagant gift for our 50th wedding anniversary. "Mom, Dad," Marcus had said, his smile wide and charming, "you've given us everything. This is just a small token of our appreciation for 50 incredible years." Catherine had nodded, her perfectly manicured hand resting gently on my arm. "You deserve the best, Evie." A chance to truly relax. The first few days on the ship had been pure bliss. The endless blue sky merged seamlessly with the sea, the salty air invigorated my lungs, and the rhythmic sway of the ship lulled me into a sense of utter peace. Arthur and I spent hours on the deck, talking about old times, laughing about shared memories, and simply enjoying each other's quiet company. We dined in elegant restaurants, watched glittering cabaret shows, and danced on moonlit decks, recapturing a youth we thought long gone. Yet, even amidst the splendor, a faint dissonance began to prick at the edges of my contentment. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed. Marcus, usually so gregarious, seemed preoccupied. I'd catch him in hushed, intense phone conversations on the upper decks, his brow furrowed, his voice low. Catherine, typically so poised, would frequently disappear, only to reappear with a strained smile, her eyes darting nervously. They often held private discussions, their voices hushed, and when Arthur or I would approach, they would abruptly fall silent, exchanging quick, unreadable glances. "They're just busy with their business," Arthur had reasoned, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "Marcus always takes his work seriously. Probably just dealing with some last-minute details." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But a tiny, unsettling knot had begun to form in the pit of my stomach, a premonition of something dark lurking beneath the glittering surface of our golden celebration. The night of our golden anniversary dinner was meant to be the crescendo of our celebration. The ship's grand dining room was a symphony of soft lighting, clinking silverware, and the hushed murmur of conversations. Marcus had reserved a prime table by a panoramic window, offering a breathtaking view of the moonlit ocean. He and Catherine arrived looking impeccable, Marcus in a crisp navy suit, Catherine in a shimmering emerald gown that perfectly matched her eyes. My heart swelled with a familiar maternal pride. How could anything be amiss in such a perfect setting, with such perfect children? Marcus raised his champagne flute, his voice resonating with an easy charm that had always captivated crowds. To my incredible parents, Evie and Arthur. 50 years. A true inspiration. You've taught me everything I know about love, resilience, and building a life of integrity. May you have many more years of happiness. His words, so heartfelt, almost melted the icy tendrils of doubt that had begun to coil around my heart. Arthur, ever the stoic, simply smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he squeezed my hand beneath the table. We laughed, we shared stories, and for a fleeting hour, the world felt right again. I almost forgot the hushed phone calls and the furtive glances. But then, as the dessert plates were cleared and the conversation momentarily lulled, Catherine excused herself to use the restroom. A few minutes later, Marcus received a text. His eyes flickered down to his phone, and a subtle tension tightened his jaw. He excused himself too, muttering something about a quick business call. I sighed, a little weary of their constant connection to work even on such a special occasion. Arthur, noticing my slight frown, simply patted my hand. It's the modern world, Evie. Don't let it spoil our night. Feeling a sudden need to stretch my legs, I decided to walk to the ladies' room myself, hoping to catch Catherine. The corridor was less crowded, bathed in the soft glow of sconces. As I approached the door, I heard voices from just around the corner, near a maintenance closet. It was Catherine's voice, hushed and urgent. I told him we can't wait much longer. This whole trip is costing a fortune, and if they find out about the offshore accounts, it's all over, Marcus, she hissed, her tone sharp with an edge of panic I hadn't heard before. He needs to move now. My breath hitched. Offshore accounts? My mind, usually so quick to dismiss anything unpleasant, seized upon those words. They hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I couldn't hear Marcus's reply, only a low, frustrated murmur. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was more than just business, this sounded illicit. I quickly retreated, my steps light and silent, my mind reeling. When I returned to the table, Arthur was sipping his coffee, his gaze fixed on the moonlit sea. Marcus and Catherine reappeared a few moments later, their smiles back in place, but to my now alerted senses, they seemed brittle, almost forced. Later that night, as we lay in our comfortable cabin, the gentle rocking of the ship doing little to soothe my churning thoughts, I tried to confide in Arthur. Arthur, I whispered, turning to face him in the dim light. I heard Catherine talking. Something about offshore accounts, and if they find out, it's all over. It sounded serious. Arthur sighed, pulling me closer. Evie, darling, you're letting your imagination run wild. They run a big business. These things can be complex. Offshore accounts are common in international trade, for tax purposes. It sounds worrying to you because you're not in that world, but I assure you, it's likely nothing nefarious. He stroked my hair, his voice calm and reassuring. Let's not let a little corporate jargon spoil our anniversary. We're here to celebrate, remember? I wanted to believe him. I truly did. Arthur had always been my rock, my voice of reason. If he said it was nothing, then it must be nothing. I tried to push the unease away, to convince myself that my mind was simply playing tricks, that I was just an old woman prone to worrying. But even as I drifted off to sleep, a seed of doubt had been planted. And unknown to me, Arthur, pragmatic and perceptive, hadn't completely dismissed my fears. His old financial consultant's instincts, long dormant, had been subtly reawakened. He began to observe Marcus and Catherine with a quiet, almost imperceptible intensity, picking up on details that my trusting heart might have overlooked. He'd watch Marcus's hands when he spoke, the fleeting expressions on Catherine's face, the way they interacted when they thought no one was watching. He was beginning his own silent investigation, connecting dots that I didn't even know existed. The next morning, a bright, deceptively cheerful Caribbean sun streamed into our cabin, yet it did little to dispel the lingering unease that clung to me. Arthur, however, seemed more alert, a subtle tension in his posture that I recognized from his days of scrutinizing market reports. Over breakfast, which I barely tasted, he was unusually quiet, his gaze often drifting towards Marcus and Catherine at their own table across the dining room. I saw him watching Marcus's nervous habit of tapping his spoon, the way Catherine would glance at her watch every few minutes. My husband, usually so relaxed on vacation, was working. His financial mind, a finely tuned instrument honed over decades, was piecing together a puzzle I didn't yet fully grasp. Later that afternoon, while Marcus and Catherine were reportedly at a shore excursion to a local market, Arthur suggested we stay on board. "My old bones need a break from all that walking, Evie," he said with a wink, but his eyes held a serious glint. He led me back to our cabin, then to the adjacent cabin that Marcus and Catherine occupied. "I need to check something," he stated, producing a small, almost invisible tool from his pocket. "Call it a hunch." My heart hammered. "Arthur, what are you doing? We can't just break into their cabin." "We're not breaking in," he corrected, his voice calm, focused. "I merely used my old keycard decoding trick. A little something I picked up from a tech conference years ago. They thought I was just an old man interested in retirement accounts." With a soft click, the door opened. The cabin was immaculate, reflecting Catherine's fastidious nature. But Arthur wasn't interested in the neatness. He moved with a methodical precision, his eyes scanning every surface, every drawer. I stood by the door, my hands clasped tightly, a sickening dread growing in my stomach. Then, he found it. Tucked away beneath a pile of Catherine's scarves in a seemingly innocent drawer, was a slim leather portfolio. Arthur's fingers, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, nestled amongst what looked like legitimate business contracts, were several thick envelopes. "Evie," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "come here." I stepped forward, my legs heavy, my breath catching in my throat. He pulled out a stack of documents. My eyes immediately fixated on the names at the top of the bank statements, Evelyn and Arthur Whitman. But the account numbers were unfamiliar, the transactions even more so. Large sums of money, hundreds of thousands, being moved to various shell companies, offshore accounts in places like Panama and the Cayman Islands. Some transfers were dated years ago, small amounts at first, then larger, more audacious sums. And the signatures were ours, or rather, horrifyingly convincing forgeries of ours. My vision blurred. This can't be right," I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "These are our savings, Arthur. Our retirement. Our future." The years of scrimping, the meticulous budgeting, the proud feeling of security we had built, it was all being siphoned away, right under our noses. But the worst was yet to come. Beneath the bank statements, Arthur found legal documents. Loan agreements, property deeds, and worst of all, a copy of our updated will, the one we had signed just months ago back home. This copy, however, had an additional clause, a small, almost hidden addendum, granting Marcus immediate and sole power of attorney over all our assets should we be incapacitated or disappear. It also drastically reduced any allocations to distant relatives or charities we had designated, essentially making Marcus and Catherine the sole immediate beneficiaries of almost everything we owned. "He was robbing us, Evie," Arthur said, his voice laced with a raw pain I had rarely heard. "Not just our money, but our legacy. He used our names, our trust. This isn't just theft, it's identity fraud. And this addendum, it ensures he gets everything quickly, cleanly." My world spun. The picture of our perfect son, the proud businessman, shattered into a million pieces. The subtle oddities, the hushed phone calls, Catherine's panic over offshore accounts, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marcus wasn't just in financial trouble, he was a thief, a swindler, systematically dismantling our lives. Why, Arthur? Why would he do this? My voice was a desperate whisper, hoarse with betrayal. Arthur's gaze was hard, cold, devoid of the usual paternal softness. Because he's always been like this, Evie. We just chose not to see it. He pulled out another document, this one a printout from a financial news website. It detailed the impending bankruptcy of several import-export companies, one of them prominently featuring Marcus's name. His business isn't successful, Evie. It's a house of cards. He's deep in debt, probably to some very unsavory people. He needed our money not just to survive, but to pay them off, to keep himself afloat. The scale of the deception was breathtaking, the betrayal soul-crushing. Our son, our only child, had been systematically bleeding us dry, all while smiling and professing his love. The golden cruise, the anniversary gift, it wasn't a gesture of affection, it was a final, elaborate performance. He needed us here, away from home, away from our lawyers, away from anyone who might inadvertently discover his schemes. He needed us isolated, vulnerable. We have to tell someone, I said, a new, fierce determination hardening my voice through the tears. The captain. The authorities. We have to expose him. Arthur nodded, his jaw set. Yes. We do. But we have to be smart about it, Evie. We have to be careful. He looked around the cabin, then back at the documents. We take these. We secure them. And we go to the ship's captain first thing in the morning. He gently put the papers back into the portfolio, then carefully, painstakingly, hid it within my own small carry-on bag, underneath my personal effects. He won't think to look there. We spent the rest of the evening in a stunned silence, the festive sounds of the cruise ship now a jarring backdrop to our shattered reality. Our golden wedding anniversary, meant to be a celebration of enduring love, had become the grim discovery of a devastating, 40-year lie. The perfect family we had believed in was nothing but a fragile, carefully constructed illusion, built by a monster masquerading as our son. The bitter taste of betrayal was a physical sensation, thick and suffocating. Tomorrow, we would confront him. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. We had no idea that tomorrow would never arrive for us, not in the way we expected. The decision to confront Marcus felt like holding a live wire. We knew it was dangerous, but to remain silent, to let him continue his predatory dance through our lives and the lives of others, was unthinkable. Arthur, ever the strategist, suggested we try to quietly send an email or make a call to his old friend, George Albright, a trusted lawyer, the moment we reached a port with reliable internet. We need to get this information off the ship, Evie, he'd said, his voice grim. If something happens to us, it has to be out there. The rest of that day felt surreal. We sat through dinner, feigning normalcy, exchanging strange smiles with Marcus and Catherine, their faces now appearing utterly grotesque to my eyes. Every word of false affection from Marcus felt like a venomous sting. Every touch from Catherine, a calculated caress. I clutched my carry-on bag, the one containing the damning portfolio, like a lifeline. After dinner, Marcus, with his usual theatrical flair, suggested a walk on the upper deck. One last family moment before we dock in Nassau tomorrow, he offered, his eyes shining with what I now recognized as a chillingly predatory gleam. The stars are magnificent tonight. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. Arthur and I exchanged a quick, knowing glance. This wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. He knew. He must have noticed our unease, the way we had avoided his gaze, the quiet intensity of our earlier conversation. He was too cunning, too observant to miss it. This was his move. That sounds lovely, dear, I managed, my voice a little too high, a little too strained. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of salt and distant blossoms from the islands. The ship's upper deck was sparsely populated, most passengers having retired or gathered in the lounges below. The soft glow of the moon cast long shadows, playing tricks on the eye. Marcus walked a few paces ahead, occasionally turning to smile at us. Catherine linked her arm through his, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the empty deck as if assessing the perfect stage. Arthur squeezed my hand. "My phone," he whispered, "is recording." "It's in my pocket, activated." A sliver of hope, cold and sharp, cut through my fear. Evidence. We reached a secluded section of the deck, overlooking the vast, dark expanse of the ocean. The railing here was lower, offering an unobstructed view, but also a stark, dizzying drop. The rhythmic churn of the ship's engines was the only sound, a relentless heartbeat in the enveloping silence. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, turning to face us, his smile no longer quite reaching his eyes. It was a practiced smile, a mask. 50 years, Mom and Dad. Imagine the memories you've made. "Yes, Marcus," Arthur replied, his voice calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. 50 years of memories. And a few revelations, it seems. Marcus's smile faltered, a hairline crack appearing in his facade. Catherine stiffened beside him. "What do you mean, Dad?" Marcus asked, his tone hardening, an edge of steel beneath the feigned innocence. "We know, Marcus," I said, unable to hold back the tremor in my voice. "We know about the bank accounts. The forgeries. The loans. The money you've been stealing from us, bit by bit, for years." The words spilled out, raw and painful, a lifetime of suppressed fears finally given voice. His face contorted, morphing from charming son to something cold and predatory. "Stealing? Mom, Dad, what are you talking about?" "You're confused. Old, perhaps, and confused." His voice was low, menacing. "These are just business arrangements. Investments I was making for you. To grow your wealth." "Don't lie to us, Marcus," Arthur interjected, his voice like flint. "We have the documents. The offshore accounts. The forged signatures. The addendum to our will, giving you immediate control. Your business is bankrupt, isn't it? You're drowning in debt, and you see our savings as your lifeline." Marcus laughed, a short, humorless bark that sent a shiver down my spine. "Lifeline? You think I need your meager savings? I'm a successful man." "This is slander." But his eyes, restless and calculating, betrayed him. He glanced over the side of the ship, then back at us, assessing, measuring. "We were going to contact the authorities, Marcus," I continued, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "First thing in Nassau. We can't let you hurt anyone else." His mask dropped completely. The charming sun vanished, replaced by a stranger with eyes as cold and empty as the night sea. "Authorities," he sneered. "And who would believe two senile old people against a respected businessman? You think you can ruin my life? You think you can expose me?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've worked too hard, taken too many risks to have it all crumble because you suddenly decided to meddle." Catherine, who had been silent, stepped forward, her face pale. "Marcus, no. Don't." But her words were weak, drowned out by the rising crescendo of our son's rage. "You should have just enjoyed your cruise, Mom and Dad. You should have stayed out of my affairs." His eyes locked onto mine, devoid of any warmth, any love. Some secrets are better left buried. In a sudden, sickening lunge, Marcus threw himself forward, his powerful hands seizing Arthur's shoulders. The force was brutal, unexpected. Arthur, despite his age, tried to resist, gripping the railing, but Marcus, is fueled by desperation and fury, was stronger, younger. I screamed, trying to grab Arthur, but Catherine, with surprising force, shoved me aside, yelling, "Don't interfere, Evie. He has to do this." I stumbled, my old bones protesting, and then I saw it, Marcus leveraging his weight, his eyes wide with a terrifying, murderous intent. He shoved Arthur with all his might. My husband, for a split second, fought like a cornered animal, but his grip on the railing slipped. He cried out my name, a heart-wrenching sound that will haunt my dreams forever. Then, Marcus turned on me. With a horrifying snarl, he seized my arms, his strength overwhelming. I clawed at him, screamed, but it was useless. He lifted me, almost effortlessly, and in one swift, violent motion, propelled me over the low railing. The world inverted. The deck lights became distant stars, the ocean rushed up to meet me with a deafening roar. I felt the sharp, sickening drop, the wind tearing at my clothes, the agonizing moment of freefall. Then, the crushing, icy embrace of the Caribbean Sea. The impact was brutal, stealing my breath, sending a searing pain through my side and head. I flailed, disoriented, the water cold and dark, pulling me down into its suffocating depths. Above me, I heard a splash. Arthur. He was still alive. Somehow. My head broke the surface, gasping, coughing up salty water. I could dimly make out the receding lights of the cruise ship, already moving away. And then, through the terror and pain, I heard Arthur's voice, surprisingly clear, cutting through the roar of the waves, a desperate whisper from just a few feet away, as he clung to a piece of debris. Evie, don't move. Play dead. Or he'll finish what he started. The words were a lifeline, a command, a chilling revelation. He hadn't just pushed us, he intended to ensure we never surfaced. And as I looked up one last time, I saw Marcus's silhouette on the railing, looking down, watching. His face, obscured by distance and darkness, was no longer visible. Only the chilling certainty that he was checking his handiwork. My vision blurred. Pain consumed me. The cold, dark water swirled around me, threatening to drag me under. But Arthur's words echoed, piercing through the fog of shock, play dead. I closed my eyes, forcing my body to relax, to float, to be nothing more than another victim swallowed by the unforgiving sea. The ultimate deception had begun. The first few minutes after the fall were a horrifying blur of instinct and agony. My lungs burned, demanding air, as the frigid shock of the ocean seized every muscle. The metallic taste of blood mingled with the bitter salt water in my mouth. I thrashed blindly, trying to orient myself, the crushing pressure of the deep pulling at my limbs. Arthur's desperate whisper, play dead, echoed in my ears, cutting through the chaos. It was a command that defied every primal urge to fight, to scream, to call for help. Slowly, painfully, I forced myself to stillness. I let the current buffet me, mimicking the unconscious drift of a corpse. I kept my eyes closed, but the darkness behind my eyelids was no less terrifying than the inky blackness of the water below. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest. A sharp, searing pain shot through my right side, a broken rib perhaps, and my head throbbed, a dull, insistent ache from where I must have struck the water, or perhaps the ship as I fell. Evie, Arthur's voice was a ragged gasp, close by. Are you there? I couldn't speak, couldn't risk a sound. I simply let out a small, almost inaudible moan, a testament to my survival and my pain. Good, he rasped, the sound carried on the gentle swell. Stay still. Don't make a sound. He'll be looking. The thought that Marcus was still up there, scanning the waves, perhaps shining a light, filled me with a terror far greater than the cold water. Our son, the boy we raised, was now a murderer, checking his handiwork. He wouldn't hesitate to finish the job if he saw any sign of life. Time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. The receding lights of the cruise ship became a distant, mocking twinkle, eventually swallowed by the horizon. We were alone. Utterly, terribly alone, adrift in the vast, indifferent ocean. I clung to a piece of debris, a splintered wooden panel, part of the ship's decorative railing, I imagined. My fingers, numb with cold, locked onto it with a desperate grip. Arthur was nearby, also clinging to a larger piece of wreckage. I could hear his labored breathing, the occasional grunt of pain. He was older than me, his body less resilient. Fear for him, a cold, sharp dread, began to supersede my own physical suffering. Are you hurt badly, love? I finally managed to whisper, the words barely escaping my chattering teeth. "Broken arm, I think," he replied, his voice strained. "And a few cracked ribs, perhaps. But nothing fatal. Not yet." His pragmatism, even in this nightmare, was a small comfort, a familiar anchor in the storm of my emotions. "How about you?" "My side. My head. But I'm alive." The simple statement felt like a miracle. The sun eventually began its slow ascent, painting the sky with hues of bruised purple and orange. The light, usually a source of comfort, now felt like an exposure. What if Marcus came back at dawn, to verify our disappearance? What if our bodies, or what he presumed to be our bodies, were spotted by another ship and identified? We had to stay dead. The thirst became an agonizing torment. My mouth was dry, parched, my throat raw from the salt water I had inadvertently swallowed. My stomach growled, a hollow ache that echoed the emptiness inside me. Every wave that crashed over us threatened to pull me from my makeshift raft, to drag me back into the endless blue. I fought it, fought the exhaustion, fought the despair that threatened to consume me. My mind replayed the scene on the deck, a horrifying loop of betrayal. Marcus's face, contorted with rage, his hands pushing. The sheer, cold malice in his eyes. How could I have been so blind? So utterly, hopelessly naive? He wasn't just in debt, he was a monster. The golden anniversary had become a gilded cage, a trap set by our own son. The thought of his calculated deception, the years he must have spent smiling at us, knowing he was stealing our future, filled me with a cold, righteous fury that, paradoxically, gave me strength. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't die out here, a nameless victim of his greed. Hours bled into what felt like days. The sun beat down, relentlessly baking my skin, making the thirst unbearable. Then, as evening approached, the sky turned a dark, angry gray. The wind picked up, whipping the waves into white-capped peaks. A storm was brewing. "Evie," Arthur called out, his voice weak. "We need to hold on. A storm is coming." The next few hours were a brutal, relentless battle against the elements. The waves grew monstrous, tossing our fragile bodies like toys. Rain lashed down, blinding us, though it did nothing to quench our thirst. I felt myself losing consciousness, slipping into a hypothermic haze. Arthur's voice, fading in and out amidst the roar of the wind and waves, was the only thing tethering me to reality. "Remember why we're doing this, Evie. For justice. For us. Don't give up." Just when I thought I couldn't endure another second, when the cold had penetrated to my very bones and the pain was a dull, constant throb, a faint light appeared on the horizon. It was a ship. A large cargo vessel, its lights bobbing in the distance. Hope, a tiny, fragile spark, ignited in my chest. But then, Arthur's voice, sharper now, despite his exhaustion. "Stay down, Evie. Don't move. Don't let them see us." He was right. If we were rescued by a large ship, taken back to civilization, the news of our survival would quickly reach Marcus. He would know. And he would come for us. We had to remain dead, invisible, until we had a plan, until we could gather our strength and our evidence. The ship passed by, a fleeting phantom in the storm, its monstrous silhouette disappearing back into the blackness. Despair threatened to engulf me, but then I felt Arthur's hand, numb and cold, find mine, a silent pact in the heart of the storm. We were still alive. And we were still fighting. The storm eventually broke, leaving behind a sky so clear it seemed to mock the recent chaos. The sea, though still swollen, had calmed, its surface now a vast, undulating mirror reflecting the brilliant sunrise. But the beauty was lost on me. Every muscle screamed in agony, every bone ached. My lips were cracked and bleeding, my throat raw with thirst. I drifted in and out of consciousness, tethered to the splintered wood, my mind a hazy fog of pain and fleeting images of Marcus's monstrous face. Arthur's presence was my only anchor. He was weaker now, his breathing shallow, but his grip on my hand, though feeble, was still there. "Stay with me, Evie," he'd rasp occasionally, his voice barely a breath. "Just a little longer. Just a little longer." Those words became my mantra. I didn't know how much longer we could endure. The sun began its slow, merciless climb, turning the surface of the ocean into a blinding, shimmering expanse. Despair was a heavy cloak, threatening to pull me under for good. I saw faces in the waves, my mother, my father, even Richard, Arthur's long-deceased brother. Were they coming to take me? Then, a new sound. Not the roar of the wind, not the endless lapping of waves. A distant, rhythmic thrumming. I forced my eyes open, squinting against the harsh light. A small, wooden boat. A fishing vessel, low in the water, its engine a faint drone. It was still far away, but it was coming closer. "Arthur," I croaked, my voice a dry, scratchy sound. "A boat." He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He saw it too. His gaze met mine, a flicker of raw, unadulterated hope, quickly followed by the return of that grim determination. "Remember," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Play dead." We lay still, suspended between life and death, as the boat approached. I could hear voices now, the distinct murmur of human conversation. The vessel was a small, brightly painted craft, clearly designed for local fishing. 3 figures were on board, a man, a woman, and a young boy. Their faces, tanned and weathered by the sun, slowly came into focus. The man, his face a web of smile lines, pointed. "Mira, Ali. Dos personas." His voice was sharp with alarm. They sped towards us, their expressions shifting from surprise to concern. As they drew alongside, the woman gasped. "Madre de Dios. Están vivos, pero apenas." The fisherman, whose name I would later learn was Mateo, reached out a strong, calloused hand. "Hold on, abuela. We will help you." He and his wife, Maria, carefully, gently, hauled us aboard. The solid deck beneath me felt like the most luxurious bed I had ever known, even as every movement sent fresh waves of pain through my body. The young boy, no older than 10, brought us fresh water in a battered canteen. It was cool, sweet, and pure, the most divine thing I had ever tasted. I drank until my throat burned, then drank some more. "Muchas gracias," Arthur murmured, his voice hoarse, but a look of profound gratitude in his eyes. "You saved us." They spoke to us in a mix of broken English and rapid Spanish, concern etched on their faces. We were alive. Miraculously, impossibly alive. Mateo explained that they were from a small, remote island, barely more than a village, far off the main shipping lanes. The nearest proper hospital was days away by ferry, but there was a small clinic on their island. The journey to the island was slow and agonizing, but the simple kindness of Mateo's family was a balm to our shattered spirits. Maria wrapped us in blankets, the boy, Miguel, offered us dried fish, which we could barely swallow. They asked no probing questions, simply accepting our mumbled story of being caught in a sudden storm and swept overboard from a small rental boat. We knew we couldn't tell them the full truth, not yet. Our safety depended on it. Upon arrival, we were immediately taken to the island's tiny clinic. It was little more than a single room with a few rickety beds and basic supplies, but to us, it was salvation. A young, earnest doctor, Dr. Ben Carter, examined us. He was American, clearly on some kind of medical mission, and his competent hands were a welcome sight. "Fractured ribs, Mrs. Whitman, and a nasty concussion," he said gently, carefully bandaging my side. "And Mr. Whitman, a broken arm and likely more cracked ribs. You both have severe hypothermia and dehydration. It's a miracle you're alive." He gave us pain medication, antibiotics, and intravenous fluids. As the initial shock and pain began to recede, a new kind of dread set in. We were safe, for now, but how long could we maintain the charade? And what about Marcus? While Dr. Carter worked, he asked questions about our accident. We stuck to our rehearsed story, vague and slightly confused, attributing our injuries to the storm and the impact of the water. But I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a subtle furrow of his brow. He was too observant. Too smart. He noticed our evasiveness, the way we glanced at each other, the gaps in our story. "You're both remarkably lucid for what you've been through," he commented, his gaze lingering on Arthur. "And you seem very wary." We simply offered tired smiles, playing the part of traumatized elderly survivors. He didn't press. Not then. A few days later, once we were stable enough to take solid food, Dr. Carter brought a small, crackling radio. "Good news," he announced, trying to sound upbeat. "The Coast Guard has confirmed your cruise ship reported 2 passengers missing and presumed drowned 2 nights ago. A Mr. and Mrs. Whitman. They've suspended the search. Your family has been notified." My heart plummeted, even though I knew this was precisely what we needed. Marcus had succeeded. In the eyes of the world, we were dead. He had mourned us, perhaps, put on a grand show of grief. And now he was free. Free to claim our inheritance, free to continue his nefarious schemes, free from the 2 people who knew his darkest secret. Dr. Carter looked at us, his eyes piercing. "Your son, a Mr. Marcus Whitman, was quoted in a short news report, expressing his profound sorrow. He said it was a tragic accident during your anniversary cruise." Arthur and I exchanged a long, silent look. My husband's eyes, though filled with unspeakable pain, also held a steely resolve. "He's mourning, is he?" Arthur finally managed, his voice devoid of emotion. "How very convenient for him." The young doctor's gaze sharpened. He said nothing, but I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes. He had heard the news report, heard the son's grief, and now he saw the raw, unspeakable truth in our faces. The pieces were starting to connect for him. We were alive, but our world had to believe we were dead. For our survival, and for justice. This simple clinic, on this forgotten island, had become our temporary sanctuary, our unlikely refuge from the son who wished us erased. The weeks that followed blurred into a painful, slow recovery. The clinic, humble as it was, became our sanctuary. Dr. Carter, true to his discerning nature, never directly confronted us about the inconsistencies in our story, but his quiet observations spoke volumes. He treated our wounds with gentle competence, always bringing us extra rations, a fresh change of clothes donated by the islanders, or a kind word. He was our silent guardian, an unexpected ally in a world that now considered us gone. Physically, we mended. My fractured ribs knitted slowly, the throbbing in my head gradually subsided, and my battered limbs regained some strength. Arthur's broken arm was set, and though he moved stiffly, his mind remained as sharp as ever. But the psychological scars ran deeper than any physical injury. Every night, the image of Marcus's enraged face, the cold glint in his eyes as he pushed me, replayed in my nightmares. I would wake in a cold sweat, clutching Arthur's hand, the quiet lapping of the waves outside our small room a constant reminder of the ocean that had almost claimed us. "We can't just stay here, Arthur," I whispered one evening, the island breeze carrying the scent of exotic flowers through the open window. "What's the plan? How do we stop him?" Arthur, who had been staring blankly at the ceiling, turned his head. His eyes, though still weary, held a rekindled fire. "We don't stop him yet, Evie. Not directly. We observe. We gather. We wait for our moment." His years as a financial consultant, his talent for strategic thinking, were now fully engaged. "They believe we're dead. That's our greatest advantage. We are ghosts, Evie, and ghosts can haunt." He spent hours meticulously mapping out possibilities, using a tattered notepad and a pencil Dr. Carter had provided. He'd request news from the mainland, carefully listening to the crackle of the small radio, piecing together fragments of information. We learned that Marcus and Catherine were indeed playing the role of devastated survivors perfectly. Local news channels had run stories about the tragic loss of the esteemed Whitman couple, featuring tearful interviews with Marcus, who spoke of his parents' adventurous spirit and their lifelong love. The sheer audacity of his performance filled me with a cold rage. He was not only trying to murder us but was also desecrating our memory with his sickening lies. "He's moving fast," Arthur observed one day, after listening to a financial news update. His company, Whitman Global Imports, is suddenly announcing a major new investment. They're liquidating some assets, leveraging new lines of credit. He's using our presumed death as a springboard. Our fear grew. We knew Marcus was dangerous, but hearing of his continued machinations, his swift grab for power and money, solidified our resolve. We couldn't let him get away with it. We owed it to ourselves, to the decades of honest work we had put into building our lives, and to the truth. It was during one of Dr. Carter's evening rounds that Arthur finally made his move. He'd observed the doctor carefully, noting his quiet integrity, his sharp mind, and the genuine compassion he showed the islanders. He was a man who listened, truly listened. "Dr. Carter," Arthur began, his voice low, measured, after ensuring I was asleep, though I was very much awake. "My wife and we haven't been entirely forthcoming about how we ended up in the water." The doctor paused, his eyes thoughtful. "I gathered as much, Mr. Whitman. Your story had too many convenient holes for a man who used to review balance sheets for a living." A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "I'm a doctor, not a detective. My job is to heal. But I also believe in justice." Arthur then, with a quiet intensity, revealed the bare bones of the truth: Marcus's financial ruin, his desperate need for our inheritance, and the calculated act of pushing us overboard. He omitted the part about the forgeries and the will for now, needing to confirm the doctor's trustworthiness. Dr. Carter listened, his expression shifting from surprise to shock, then to a grim understanding. "Your own son," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "That's unspeakable." "Indeed," Arthur replied. "Which is why no one must know we're alive. Especially Marcus. We need your help, doctor. We need to reach someone. A trusted lawyer back in the States. Someone who can start an investigation, quietly, without raising alarms." The doctor hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. He was a medical professional in a remote location, not an operative. But then he looked at Arthur's earnest, honest face, and then glanced at my seemingly sleeping form. He saw the pain, the betrayal, the desperate need for justice in our eyes. "I have a satellite phone for emergencies," Dr. Carter finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's unreliable, but it might work. And I know a few people, trusted colleagues who might be able to help pass a message discreetly." A wave of relief, so profound it almost brought me to tears, washed over me. We weren't alone. We had an ally. Over the next few days, with Dr. Carter's careful assistance, Arthur managed to compose a coded message, hinting at foul play and Marcus's involvement, and send it to his old friend, George Albright, a sharp-witted corporate lawyer known for his meticulousness. The message was vague enough not to immediately expose our survival, but specific enough to trigger George's suspicion and prompt an investigation into Marcus's finances. We also asked Dr. Carter to try and find any current news reports or legal filings related to our estate, to get a clearer picture of what Marcus was doing. The wait for a reply, or even a confirmation that the message had been received, was agonizing. Every passing day felt like a victory for Marcus, another step closer to him solidifying his control over our shattered lives. I constantly battled paranoia. Every time a fishing boat approached the island, every unfamiliar face, I envisioned Marcus arriving, his cold eyes searching, ready to finish what he started. The island, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a fragile bubble, susceptible to bursting at any moment. But with each sunset, as I watched the vibrant hues paint the sky above the endless ocean, a new kind of resolve solidified within me. The trusting, naive Evie Whitman had died that night on the cruise ship. In her place was a woman hardened by betrayal, fueled by a fierce desire for truth. My son had tried to erase us, to make us ghosts. But soon, these ghosts would return to haunt him. Life on the tiny island settled into a strange, unsettling rhythm. Our physical wounds slowly faded, but the deeper ones, etched onto our souls, festered. The days were filled with the gentle sounds of the ocean and the rhythmic thrum of fishing boats, yet my mind was a constant storm of anxiety. Every rustle in the palm trees, every shadow cast by the setting sun, seemed to hold the potential for Marcus's insidious return. Arthur, though outwardly composed, often had a distant look in his eyes, a sign of his ceaseless mental calculations. "He's always been slippery," Arthur murmured one afternoon, as we sat on a rough-hewn bench outside the clinic, watching the children of the island play near the shore. He hadn't said much about Marcus's past deceptions before, perhaps out of a lingering, desperate hope. But now, the dam had broken. "Remember that time he lost his college tuition money, Evie? Said he'd invested it in a promising tech startup that went belly up?" Arthur's voice was tinged with bitter irony. I wrote it off as youthful folly, an expensive lesson. But now, I wonder. My mind raced back. Marcus had been 20, full of bright ideas and grand pronouncements. He'd come home, head bowed, claiming a devastating loss, blaming a fraudulent venture capitalist. We had comforted him, told him it was just money, that his education was more important. We'd even dipped into our emergency fund to get him back on track. Now, the memory felt like a cruel joke. Had he even invested it? Or had he simply pocketed it, already honing his craft of deception? And the loan for his first car, I recalled, a fresh wave of nausea washing over me. He promised to pay us back, every penny. But then his business took off, or so he said, and he convinced us to just consider it an early inheritance. Arthur nodded, his jaw tight. Yes. And the small errors in his early business accounting, the ones I helped him correct. I thought he was just inexperienced. Now I see. They weren't errors. They were tests. Testing how far he could push, how much we would overlook. Every memory, every moment of perceived innocence, now twisted into something sinister. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a lifetime of carefully constructed lies beneath the facade of our beloved son. The naive, trusting parents we had been, so willing to believe the best, had inadvertently become accomplices to his monstrous transformation. The satellite phone calls to George Albright, facilitated by Dr. Carter, were our lifeline to the world we had left behind. They were brief, fraught with static, and conducted in hushed tones, often late at night when the clinic was quiet. Arthur, using a coded language only George would understand, began to feed him information, fragments of truth that would allow the seasoned lawyer to dig deeper without revealing our survival. "George is a good man," Arthur assured me after one such call, though his face was etched with worry. He started looking into Whitman Global Imports. He found some irregularities. Not just financial, Evie. There are whisperings of ties to some less than reputable associates. The news sent a fresh chill down my spine. Marcus wasn't just a thief, he was diving into dangerous waters. The thought of him entangled with criminals, possibly violent ones, added another layer of urgency to our predicament. We weren't just protecting our legacy, we were fighting to bring down a man who could potentially hurt many others. "He's also confirmed the addendum to our will," Arthur continued, his voice grim. "It was filed just weeks before the cruise. And he's already attempting to access some of our more liquid assets. Claiming he needs funds to manage the funeral arrangements and legal formalities." The audacity was breathtaking. He had tried to kill us, and before our bodies were even cold, or, in his mind, lost forever, he was already cashing in. It solidified my resolve. Any lingering flicker of maternal affection, any desire to shield him from consequences, was extinguished. He wasn't a lost boy who'd made a mistake, he was a calculated criminal. The paranoia, however, was constant. Every time a supply boat arrived from the mainland, every time an unfamiliar face appeared in the village, I would retreat into the shadows of the clinic, my heart pounding. What if Marcus had sent someone? What if he suspected? The idea that he might send a hitman to finish the job, to ensure his parents remained truly dead, was a constant, terrifying companion. Arthur shared my fears, always scanning the horizon, always alert. We were ghosts, yes, but ghosts haunted by the very living presence we sought to bring down. Dr. Carter, sensing our heightened anxiety, did his best to reassure us, providing updates on local boat traffic and making discreet inquiries. He understood the precariousness of our situation. He was, in his quiet way, risking his own career, perhaps even his safety, by aiding us. We owed him a debt we could never repay. Through George, we also learned the terrifying scale of Marcus's desperation. He wasn't just facing bankruptcy, he owed enormous sums to loan sharks, to shadowy figures rumored to be involved in drug trafficking and arms dealing. Our entire estate, our hard-earned savings, our very home, was his last hope. If he failed to get it, the consequences for him would be swift and brutal. This wasn't merely about greed anymore, it was about his own survival, and he clearly valued his survival more than ours. The realization was stark and chilling. We weren't just inconvenient obstacles to Marcus. We were the solution to his death sentence. Our continued existence, and the truth we held, was a threat he simply could not afford. We had to remain hidden, to build our case brick by painful brick, until we could strike with overwhelming force. We would not give him a second chance to finish what he started. Months crawled by on the island, each day a slow, agonizing step towards a future we couldn't quite envision. Our bodies, though healed, still carried the phantom pains of the fall and the relentless ocean. But it was the quiet despair, the gnawing grief for the son we had lost, that truly haunted me. I often sat by the shore, watching the endless waves, wondering if I would ever feel whole again. "We can't stay here forever, Evie," Arthur stated one morning, breaking the comfortable silence that had grown between us. He held a crumpled, weeks-old newspaper that Dr. Carter had managed to procure. The headline spoke of Marcus's latest business venture, a massive real estate development deal, lauded as a testament to his resilience after the tragic loss of his parents. His face, smiling from the page, seemed to mock us. "I know," I replied, my voice flat. The idea of returning, of confronting him, filled me with a sickening blend of dread and fierce resolve. It meant publicly acknowledging that our son was a monster. It meant tearing apart whatever was left of our family, our name. It meant choosing justice over the illusion of peace. "George has made significant progress," Arthur continued, referring to our lawyer friend. "He's uncovered enough to raise serious red flags. The police are now involved, albeit discreetly. But he says for the full weight of the law to come down, for Marcus to truly face justice for everything, we need to make an appearance." Appear? The word felt alien, foreign on my tongue. "Like ghosts?" Arthur's gaze was steady. "Exactly like ghosts, Evie. We need to rise from the dead. And we need to do it at a moment and place where it will have maximum impact, and where Marcus is at his most vulnerable." He spent days, then weeks, meticulously planning our return. Every detail was considered: where to land, how to travel, who to contact first, how to ensure our safety. He was a general preparing for battle, and I, his loyal, terrified soldier. The psychological toll was immense. How do you prepare to betray your own child? How do you mentally steel yourself to send the boy you once cradled in your arms to prison for the rest of his life? There were nights I wept silently into my pillow, mourning the Marcus who never truly existed, the son I had loved so blindly. My heart ached with the profound sense of loss, not of his life, but of his innocence, his humanity. But then I would remember Arthur's whisper in the water, the cold calculation in Marcus's eyes as he pushed me, and the faces of countless others Marcus had undoubtedly swindled. The fleeting compassion would harden into cold, righteous anger. This was not just for us. It was for justice. Through Dr. Carter's clandestine efforts, we eventually made direct contact with George Albright via a secure line. Hearing George's familiar, booming voice, tinged with shock and relief, was like a glimpse of home. He confirmed everything. Marcus had indeed been systematically looting our accounts, forging documents, and was now deeply entangled with dangerous individuals, his business a front for illicit activities. George also informed us that he had approached the authorities, presenting his findings to a seasoned detective, Frank Reynolds. "Detective Reynolds is a good man, Evie," George assured me during one of our calls, his voice crackling with static. "He's a cynic, as all good detectives are, but the evidence Arthur helped me unearth is too compelling to ignore. He's discreetly opened an investigation into Whitman Global Imports, focusing on the financial irregularities. He's skeptical about your resurrection, of course, but he's open to being convinced." The idea of convincing a police detective that we had been pushed off a cruise ship by our son and then survived for months, playing dead, felt utterly preposterous. But we had no choice. This was our path to reclaiming our lives, and to ensuring Marcus paid for his crimes. Meanwhile, Marcus, completely unaware that his parents were very much alive and plotting his downfall, was basking in his perceived triumph. News reports, relayed to us by Dr. Carter, painted a picture of him as a grieving, yet resilient, entrepreneur, forging ahead with his ambitious real estate deal. He was a master manipulator, holding charity galas in our memory, offering heartfelt condolences to grieving friends, all while consolidating his ill-gotten gains. He even tried to sell our beloved family home, claiming it held too many painful memories, though Arthur quickly put a stop to that through George, citing obscure legal clauses we'd put in place years ago. The anger simmered within me, fueling my resolve. Arthur and I meticulously planned our re-entry. We decided it had to be a public event, a shock that would strip Marcus of his carefully constructed facade. A moment where his carefully curated image would shatter, beyond repair. George informed us of an upcoming charity gala, hosted by Marcus himself, to officially launch his new development and, grotesquely, to unveil a memorial plaque in our honor. It was the perfect stage for our return. The closer the date approached, the more palpable the tension became. My heart was a drum in my chest, a constant, insistent beat of fear and anticipation. We spent our last few days on the island in quiet contemplation, saying goodbye to the kind Matteo and Maria, who knew only that we were finally well enough to return home. We couldn't tell them the truth, couldn't burden them with the weight of our terrible secret. Dr. Carter, however, knew. He gave us a grim nod, a silent promise of support should we need it. We traveled under false identities, a long, circuitous journey by various small planes and ferries, until we finally landed on American soil, two weary, gray-haired travelers, officially dead, but very much alive and burning with a quiet, furious resolve. The air tasted different here, sharper, colder, filled with the ghosts of our past. We were no longer simply survivors, we were avengers, ready to face the monster we had unknowingly raised. The stage was set. The curtain was about to rise on Marcus's final act. The night of the gala shimmered with a deceptive brilliance. George Albright, our loyal friend and now our reluctant co-conspirator, had arranged for our discreet arrival. He met us at a pre-arranged location, a small, unassuming hotel on the outskirts of the city, miles from the glittering venue. Seeing him, gaunt with worry but firm with resolve, was like seeing a beacon of hope after months of darkness. "Evie, Arthur," he whispered, embracing us tightly, his voice thick with emotion. I can barely believe it. It's truly you." "Indeed, George," Arthur replied, a dry edge to his voice. "More resilient than our son gave us credit for." George outlined the plan. Marcus's charity gala, held at the opulent grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, was in full swing. He was scheduled to give a keynote address, presenting his new development and, in a nauseating display of hypocrisy, unveiling a memorial plaque dedicated to his beloved parents. Detective Reynolds and his team were already positioned within the ballroom, disguised as guests, ready to act on George's signal. "It has to be precise," George explained, his eyes serious. "When Marcus is at his most triumphant, his most boastful. That's when you appear." It will break his composure, expose him for what he is, and give the police the clear signal they need. My heart pounded with a ferocious rhythm against my ribs. My elegant evening gown, purchased by George in a far cry from the simple clothes I'd worn on the island, felt like a costume. My hair was freshly styled, my face made up to conceal the lingering exhaustion and trauma. I looked like Evelyn Whitman, the gracious hostess, the beloved wife, but inside, I was a battlefield. The thought of facing Marcus, of witnessing his grotesque performance, filled me with a primal dread. But the fire of justice, fueled by Arthur's quiet strength, burned brighter. "Are you ready, Evie?" Arthur asked, taking my hand. His eyes, though weary, were filled with an unwavering resolve. He was ready. And with him, I was ready too. The grand ballroom was a dazzling spectacle of chandeliers, polished marble, and a sea of impeccably dressed guests. Waiters glided silently with trays of champagne, and a live orchestra played soft, sophisticated melodies. Marcus is radiant and commanding in a custom-tailored tuxedo, held court at a prominent table, Catherine by his side, resplendent in a deep crimson dress. They looked the epitome of success, the grieving but resilient children. My stomach churned. George led us through a discreet service entrance, ensuring we remained unseen until the perfect moment. We watched from a hidden alcove near the main stage as Marcus approached the podium. A hush fell over the room. The lights dimmed, focusing on him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice smooth, resonant, captivating. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a new venture, but also the enduring spirit of generosity and resilience. A spirit I learned from the two most remarkable people I have ever known, my parents, Evelyn and Arthur Whitman." A ripple of sympathetic murmurs went through the crowd. My blood ran cold. The sheer audacity, the unmitigated gall of his performance, was nauseating. He spoke of our unwavering love, our tireless commitment to community, our adventurous spirit that tragically led to our demise on the high seas. He dabbed at his eyes with a silk handkerchief, a perfectly timed gesture of sorrow. "It is in their honor," he continued, his voice thick with feigned emotion, "that I dedicate this new development and this evening's proceeds. And now, if you would all turn your attention to the screen, we will unveil a small tribute to their incredible legacy." A large screen behind him flickered to life, showing a montage of our family photos, smiling, oblivious to the viper in our midst. Pictures of a younger Marcus, laughing, embraced by us, our faces beaming with love. It was a dagger to my heart. He was exploiting our most cherished memories, turning our very existence into a prop for his grand deception. And finally, Marcus announced, his voice reaching a crescendo of theatrical grief, a small token of our everlasting love. A plaque, to stand at the entrance of the new Whitman Legacy Plaza, ensuring their names live on forever. As the lights on the stage brightened, focusing on a veiled object next to the podium, George gave us a subtle nod. "Now," he whispered. My legs felt like lead, but Arthur's hand in mine was firm. We stepped out of the shadows, walking slowly, deliberately, towards the main stage. The music faltered. Heads began to turn. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Whispers erupted, like dry leaves scattering in a sudden wind. Marcus, his back to us, had just reached out to pull the veil from the plaque. "For my beloved parents," he began, his voice cracking with rehearsed emotion. "Marcus." My voice, though soft, cut through the buzzing whispers like a shard of ice. It was a voice he hadn't heard in months, a voice he believed to be forever silenced. He froze. His hand, suspended mid-air above the plaque, trembled. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he turned. His eyes, initially wide with confusion, narrowed into a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. The blood drained from his face, leaving it ashen. The carefully constructed mask of grief and triumph shattered, revealing the raw, panicked animal beneath. He stared at us, Evelyn and Arthur Whitman, standing there, alive and very real, bathed in the spotlight meant for his deception. He looked as if he'd seen true ghosts. Catherine, seated at his table, let out a strangled cry. She half rose, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning horror. "Mom? Dad?" Marcus stammered, his voice choked, his composure utterly gone. The microphone amplified his panicked whisper to the entire, now silent, ballroom. That's impossible. You're dead." "A convenient assumption, wouldn't you agree, son?" Arthur's voice was calm, cutting, laced with an iron-cold fury I rarely heard. "But as you can see, the reports of our death have been greatly exaggerated." My gaze met Marcus's. There was no longer any need for pretense. The profound pain in my heart warred with a righteous anger. "You pushed us, Marcus," I stated, my voice clear and unwavering, echoing through the silent ballroom. "You pushed your own parents into the ocean, to drown, so you could steal our life savings and cover up your crimes." The words hung in the air, a devastating pronouncement. A stunned silence descended upon the guests, broken only by Catherine's whimpering. Marcus's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, for a way to salvage his crumbling lie. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, only a choked gurgle. Just then, Detective Reynolds, shedding his waiter's jacket, stepped forward from the shadows near the stage, his badge clearly visible. Several other plainclothes officers moved in, strategically surrounding Marcus and Catherine's table. "Marcus Whitman," Detective Reynolds announced, his voice ringing with authority. "And Catherine Whitman. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Evelyn and Arthur Whitman, and for numerous counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." Marcus's eyes, filled with a primal rage and despair, locked onto mine one last time. It was the look of a trapped animal, devoid of humanity. He lunged, not at me, but towards a side exit, a desperate, futile attempt to escape. But the officers were swift, intercepting him. Catherine, meanwhile, collapsed back into her chair, sobbing hysterically, covering her face with her hands. The orchestra remained silent. The waiters froze. The glittering ballroom, moments ago a stage for deceit, was now a scene of utter chaos and exposed depravity. Our son, the monster we had unknowingly raised, was finally, irrevocably, brought to justice. Chapter 11: The Unraveling of the Lie. The ensuing chaos was a maelstrom of flashing lights, shouting, and a cacophony of bewildered gasps and murmurs from the stunned guests. Marcus, snarling and struggling violently against the officers, was a grotesque parody of the charming man who had just stood at the podium. His tuxedo, a symbol of his fabricated success, now looked like a straitjacket, binding a cornered beast. Catherine, meanwhile, had devolved into a whimpering mess, repeating "No, no, this can't be happening," as officers gently but firmly led her away from the table. Detective Reynolds approached us, his serious face softened with a hint of relief and professional satisfaction. "Mrs. Whitman, Mr. Whitman. You were magnificent." The shock on his face, invaluable. The confession was practically involuntary. He indicated the other officers who were now taking statements from the horrified guests, some of whom looked utterly sickened, others openly weeping. A silence had fallen over Marcus's table. The half-unveiled memorial plaque, still standing next to the podium, now seemed like a monument to his monstrous deceit, a chilling testament to the lengths he was willing to go. "Take them," Arthur said, his voice raw, his gaze fixed on Marcus as he was finally restrained and led out of the ballroom, still yelling incoherently. "Take them both." The words were devoid of anger, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking weariness. It was the sound of a father burying his son, even while that son was still breathing. As the doors swung shut behind Marcus, a palpable sigh seemed to ripple through the ballroom. Then, a sudden surge of reporters, who had been alerted by the commotion, burst in, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Whitman. Mr. Whitman. Is it true? Your son tried to kill you? How did you survive? What happened on the cruise?" George Albright, ever the professional, stepped in front of us, shielding us from the onslaught. "My clients have just been through an unimaginable ordeal. They will make a full statement to the authorities in due course. For now, please respect their privacy. But privacy was a luxury we had long lost. Our story, the unbelievable saga of betrayal and miraculous survival, exploded across every news channel and social media platform within hours. The local papers screamed headlines like "Parents Rise from the Grave to Expose Son's Murder Plot" and "Golden Anniversary Turns to Blood Feud." Our faces, gaunt and tired but undeniably alive, stared out from screens and newspaper pages alongside mugshots of a furious, defiant Marcus and a tear-streaked Catherine. The police station was a whirlwind of statements, interviews, and emotional exhaustion. We recounted everything: Marcus's early deceits, the discovery of the forged documents, the terrifying night on the deck, Arthur's quick thinking in the water, our harrowing survival, Dr. Carter's help, and finally, our meticulous plan to return. Arthur handed over the small digital recorder, its contents a chilling testament to Marcus's murderous intent and Catherine's complicity. The recording, though muffled by the water and the struggle, contained Marcus's threats and Catherine's urging during the attack. "The recording is crucial," Detective Reynolds confirmed, his voice grave. "Combined with your testimony, Mr. Albright's meticulous financial investigation, and the admissions we overheard during the arrest, this is an airtight case. Attempted murder. Fraud. Forgery. Embezzlement. He's looking at a very long time." As the hours wore on, the initial surge of adrenaline gave way to a crushing emptiness. We had achieved our goal. Marcus and Catherine were in custody. Justice, in its own slow, grinding way, was being served. But the cost was astronomical. The son we had loved, the family we had cherished, was irrevocably shattered. Later that night, in a sterile interview room, Detective Reynolds brought us an update. We interviewed Catherine Whitman. She's attempting to negotiate a plea. Blaming Marcus entirely. Claims she was terrified of him, that she only went along with his schemes out of fear. Says she didn't know the full extent of his crimes, especially not the plan to eliminate you. He paused, his expression unreadable. "It's a common tactic. We'll see if it holds up." Arthur simply nodded, his face etched with profound sadness. "She always struck me as ambitious, not inherently malicious. But she chose her path. She chose to enable him." The most painful part was not just the betrayal, but the understanding that we had failed. We had failed to see the darkness festering within our own child. We had enabled his lies with our blind trust, our unwavering belief in his goodness. The guilt was a heavy weight, a bitter counterpoint to the relief of our survival. We were taken to a secure location, a small apartment provided by the police, where we could finally rest, safe from the public frenzy and Marcus's potential retribution. The silence of the apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the constant lapping of the waves on the island. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Arthur's warm presence beside me. It was over. The battle was won. But the war for my heart, for my peace, had just begun. The intervening months between Marcus's arrest and the start of the trial were a desolate landscape of legal consultations, therapeutic sessions, and a slow, agonizing effort to piece together the shattered fragments of our lives. The quiet anonymity of the island was replaced by the relentless glare of public scrutiny. We were no longer just Evelyn and Arthur Whitman, we were the miraculously resurrected parents, symbols of a monstrous betrayal, our faces splashed across every news outlet. The public was fascinated, horrified, and eager for every detail. We learned that Marcus, initially defiant, had attempted to portray us as senile, paranoid, and delusional. He claimed we had fabricated the entire story, perhaps suffering from a shared psychosis. Catherine, true to Detective Reynolds' prediction, had quickly sought a plea bargain, painting herself as a terrified, manipulated wife, a victim of Marcus's overwhelming charisma and cunning. She denied any knowledge of the murder plot, admitting only to financial improprieties under duress. The trial itself was a grueling, soul-crushing spectacle. The courtroom, packed with reporters and morbidly curious onlookers, felt like a public arena for our deepest sorrows. Each day, we sat on hard benches, listening to the dry, technical language of lawyers dissecting our life, our marriage, and the unspeakable actions of our son. When it was my turn to testify, the world seemed to narrow to the confines of that witness stand. I looked at Marcus. He sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed, his face a carefully constructed mask of injured innocence and simmering resentment. There were no tears, no remorse in his eyes, only a cold, hard defiance. He was not the boy I had raised. He was a stranger, a perfectly crafted illusion who had worn my son's face for decades. My voice, surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands, recounted everything: the golden wedding dream, the insidious creeping doubts, the discovery of the forged documents, the calculated push into the dark ocean, the agonizing battle for survival, Arthur's whispered command, and our desperate fight to return. I spoke of the years of smaller deceptions, the tuition money, the car loan, the gradual chipping away at our trust. Each word was a fresh cut, tearing open old wounds. Under cross-examination, Marcus's lawyer tried to discredit me, suggesting age-related memory issues, the trauma of the accident, and even suggesting I harbored a lifelong favoritism towards a fictional, perfect son, leading to an irrational hatred for Marcus. But my testimony, buttressed by Arthur's equally powerful account and the chilling audio recording from his phone, stood firm. The jury heard Marcus's voice, raw with rage, confirming his intent to silence us. They heard Catherine's panicked urgings during the struggle. Arthur's testimony was particularly poignant. He meticulously laid out Marcus's financial schemes, detailing the shell corporations, the fraudulent transfers, the immense debt to unsavory characters. His logical, unshakable presentation left no room for doubt about Marcus's desperate motives. He didn't just want our money, Arthur stated, his voice resonating with a quiet authority. He needed it to save his own life from the people he owed. Our death was his salvation. Catherine's testimony was a desperate, pathetic attempt to save herself. She sobbed, claimed ignorance, and vehemently pointed the finger at Marcus as the sole architect of the plot, painting him as a monster who had coerced her into complicity. Marcus, in turn, erupted in fury, yelling at her from the defense table, accusing her of being equally involved, of suggesting the cruise in the first place. Their alliance, once forged in deceit, completely imploded in the courtroom, each one tearing at the other to save their own skin. It was a sordid, heartbreaking spectacle of pure self-preservation. After days of agonizing deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. Guilty. The word echoed through the silent courtroom, a solemn hammer blow. Marcus Whitman was found guilty of attempted first-degree murder, multiple counts of aggravated fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Catherine Whitman was found guilty as an accomplice to attempted murder and on several counts of fraud. The judge's voice was stern, unwavering as he delivered the sentences. Marcus was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years to life in a maximum security prison, without the possibility of parole. Catherine received a lesser sentence, but still substantial, 15 to 20 years, with a possibility of parole only after a decade. A collective sigh of relief, mingled with profound sadness, swept through the gallery. Justice, though cold and unforgiving, had been served. We had faced our son, told our truth, and seen him held accountable. Yet, there was no triumphant cheer in my heart, only a vast, aching emptiness. The boy I had once loved was gone, lost to a darkness I could not comprehend. In the days that followed, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives reached out, some with genuine sympathy, others with awkward apologies for having believed Marcus's narrative. Our home, once a haven, now felt permeated by the ghost of Marcus's betrayal, every corner holding a memory, now tainted. We had won, but at a cost that transcended mere financial loss. We had lost our son. We had lost our faith in the fundamental goodness of our own flesh and blood. And the quiet, simple life we had built was gone forever, replaced by a complex, painful new reality. The world moved on, but for Arthur and me, time seemed to unfold differently. We were free, physically and legally, but the weight of Marcus's betrayal cast a long, enduring shadow. Our house, once a sanctuary of cherished memories, now felt strangely hollow, each room echoing with the ghost of a past that was both beautiful and tragically false. The familiar scent of my apple pies no longer brought the same comfort, they tasted of bittersweet remembrance. We spent weeks in a quiet, almost reclusive state. Friends visited, offering words of sympathy and support, but their pity often felt like a fresh wound. How do you explain to someone that your own son tried to kill you? How do you articulate the profound, soul-shattering grief of mourning a child who is still alive, locked away by your own testimony? We found solace primarily in each other, our hands clasped tight across the kitchen table, our silent understanding a bond forged in fire and ice. Arthur, though aged by the ordeal, remained my steady anchor. His pragmatism, his unwavering belief in truth, even when it hurt, pulled me through the darkest days. One afternoon, George Albright visited, bringing not just legal papers but a new kind of challenge. "Evie, Arthur," he began gently, his voice softer than usual. "Social services has removed Marcus and Catherine's children. Little Lily and Ben. They're confused, understandably. Asking for their parents." My heart ached. Our grandchildren. Innocent, unwitting victims of their parents' depravity. They were too young to comprehend the monstrous truth, too fragile to grasp the concept of betrayal. They only knew that their mommy and daddy were suddenly gone. "What are their options, George?" Arthur asked, his voice rough. "Foster care, initially," George replied. "But as their only living grandparents, you could apply for permanent custody. It would be a long, arduous process, given your ages and what you've just been through. But they deserve a stable home, a chance at a normal life." The idea was overwhelming. At 68 and 70, raising two young children felt like scaling a new, terrifying mountain. But as I looked at Arthur, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a reflection of my own yearning. These children, Lily, with her bright, curious eyes, and little Ben, with his infectious giggle, were the last innocent connection to a family that Marcus had destroyed. They were not Marcus's sins, they were our hope. "We'll do it, George," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "We'll take them in. We'll give them a home." Arthur nodded, squeezing my hand. "They need us, Evie. And perhaps we need them too." The process was indeed long and emotionally draining. We faced skeptical social workers, underwent extensive interviews, and revisited the trauma of the past months countless times. But our love for Lily and Ben, and our unwavering commitment to their well-being, shone through. Slowly, gradually, they came to live with us, bringing a burst of chaotic energy, innocent laughter, and a renewed purpose into our quiet, wounded home. Our routine changed dramatically. Mornings were no longer about leisurely coffee, but about cereal and school runs. Evenings, once filled with quiet conversation, now revolved around bedtime stories and homework. The house, once heavy with unspoken grief, slowly began to fill with the sounds of childhood. It was messy, exhausting, and utterly, wonderfully life-affirming. Every night, when I tucked them into bed, I would tell them stories. Not about Marcus, not about the darkness, but about a kind, honest, loving man named Richard. Their uncle, the brother they never knew. I spoke of his laughter, his dreams, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. I wove tales of a brave, strong man who loved his family deeply. It was my way of reclaiming a piece of our lost history, of ensuring that goodness, not deceit, was the foundation of their understanding of family. Arthur would often join me, adding his own quiet memories of his firstborn son, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and gentle pride. I am no longer the naive Evie Whitman who blindly trusted and easily forgave. The woman who looked away from discomfort and clung to illusions of perfection died on that cruise ship. I have been reborn, hardened by the icy embrace of the ocean and the searing pain of betrayal, but also tempered by an unbreakable resolve. I have learned that truth, however bitter, is the only foundation for real peace. Some days, the memories still haunt me. The image of Marcus's face, contorted with rage, the splash of the water, the cold, whispering dread. But then I look at Lily, building a tower of blocks in the living room, or hear Ben's delighted squeal as Arthur chases him around the yard. And I remember why we fought. Why we played dead. Why we came back. Our golden wedding anniversary did not end with a celebratory toast, but with a terrifying plunge into the dark unknown. It irrevocably shattered the family we thought we had. But from the wreckage, something new, something honest, and something deeply resilient has emerged. Arthur and I, two old souls who survived the unimaginable, are building a new future, brick by painful, loving brick, for two innocent children. It's not the life we planned, but it's a life built on truth, love, and an unwavering commitment to never again let a lie define our family. We faced the monster, survived the depths, and found our way back to the light.